hard to become black Americans in this society, and we were slaves here. And we did a lot of free work.
The fact that when you
anti-slavery,
let's talk about the fact.
I mean, slavery in America was.
Do you realize that only less than 2% of white Americans owned slaves?
But it was a system of white supremacy.
You realize that slavery is thousands of years old?
White people were
Do you know
the slave
who
owners.
was the first race to try to end slavery? Well, what's controversial?
I'm very surprised that you're trying to.
Like, have you noticed how comfortable people feel saying racist things on CNN? Whether it's Scott Jennings and all the many things he defends, or Jillian Michaels come on and said what she said a couple of days ago.
Jillian, I'm surprised that you're trying to litigate who was the beneficiary of slavery and who was not.
What I'm trying to tell you is
in the context of American history. Okay. In the context of American history, what are you saying is incorrect by saying that it was white people oppressing black people?
Every single thing.
Jillian Michaels is no stranger to controversy, but this time she may have crossed a line that even her toughest critics didn't see coming. We're not talking about a workout plan or some outdated diet advice. We're talking about national television, slavery, white supremacy, and now possible legal threats against comedian DL Hughley. Think about that for a second. A celebrity fitness trainer who made her name yelling at contestants on The Biggest Loser is now making headlines for defending slavery statistics and allegedly threatening one of the most outspoken comedians in America. The story started as a debate about museums, of all things, but quickly spiraled into one of the messiest public meltdowns Jillian has ever had. And the fallout? It's exposing contradictions, hypocrisy, and receipts from her past that a lot of people had either forgotten or never knew about.
It makes sense to me that someone like Jillian Michaels would say something like this. She is from a reality TV show. She's known for the show The Biggest Loser. It was a show where they would bring on people who were overweight, struggling with image and everything, and they would help them lose weight by making them do slavery.
So how exactly did Jillian go from arguing about Smithsonian exhibits to becoming the internet's main character in a conversation about racism, history, and hypocrisy? Well, buckle up, because this one just gets wilder with every turn. It all began when Jillian was invited onto CNN for what was supposed to be a fairly straightforward conversation. The topic on the table? Donald Trump's latest complaint about woke museums. That's right, the former president had criticized the Smithsonian Institution, claiming the exhibits leaned too heavily on subjects like colonization, slavery, and the darker parts of U.S. history. For most guests, this would have been a chance to discuss whether museums should soften or sharpen their approach to history. But Jillian decided to go off script. Instead of sticking to the conversation, she jumped into one of the most tired and misleading arguments we've heard in these debates: the infamous claim that less than 2% of white Americans owned slaves. That's when things got heated.
Well, I can only hope Jillian Michaels is a better trainer than she is an explainer.
He's not whitewashing slavery. So
he's not?
He's not. No,
okay.
He's not. And you cannot tie imperialism and racism and slavery to just one race, which is pretty much what every single exhibit does. But let's talk.
In her tour, trying to, kind of calibrate what she said, she was talking about the fact that, there were good people on both sides. There were, people who were forced slaves and people who fought against it. But you weren't one of them. She talked about marching in the civil rights. You didn't do that. She talked about fighting a war. You didn't do that. I remember when Mitch McConnell talked about, we have elected a black president. He didn't do that. The conversation is what you say it is. In Texas right now, their textbooks, and they're one of the largest school districts in the country, their textbooks call slavery involuntary workers. They call them workers. They call them immigrants. They've always owned the narrative. The Daughters of the Confederacy put a curriculum together for the entire South. So the one thing I agree with you is there are two sides to every story, except you control both of them. You control both sides. You get to tell who is good and who is bad. You get to call slavery what you want. And what we're having right now is a conversation where other people who see it a different way are getting their part, and you don't like it, and you get to control that. Right now, the Smithsonian is being decided by a guy who doesn't want certain parts of that history told. So you're right. There are two sides to every story, except you get to control both sides.
Abby Phillip, the host, immediately pushed back, reminding Jillian that slavery was never about raw numbers, but about an entrenched system of white supremacy. But instead of pausing or clarifying, Jillian did what she's known for. She doubled down. Her voice rose, she tried to flip the narrative, and she framed herself as a victim, accusing the panel of racializing her comments. The irony? She was literally defending an argument used to minimize white responsibility in slavery. And as you'll see, the backlash wasn't just about what she said. It was about who she is at home, which made her comments sting even more.
I'm surprised.
Do you realize that
Jillian, I'm surprised that you're trying to litigate who was the beneficiary of slavery and who was not.
What I'm trying to tell you is
in
that
the context of American history.
Enter DL Hughley. If you've followed him for even a minute, you know this is a man who does not bite his tongue. DL has built his career on sharp, unapologetic commentary, and when he saw Jillian Michaels' CNN meltdown, he didn't waste a second. His first jab was classic DL. Jillian, he said, clearly spends more time in the gym than she does in the library. On the surface, it sounded like a quick roast, but underneath it was a warning shot, because DL came armed with facts. He ripped apart Jillian's favorite talking point, that tired claim about less than 2% of white Americans owning slaves. According to DL, that statistic has been weaponized for years to downplay the scale of slavery and erase how deeply embedded it was in American life. He pointed out that in many southern states, the numbers weren't just a tiny fraction. In places like Mississippi, South Carolina, and Georgia, upwards of 20% of white people owned enslaved Africans outright. And when you zoom out to households, meaning if the head of the house owned slaves, the entire family benefited, that percentage shoots much higher.
Surely seen this clip of Jillian Michaels saying this about slavery.
Do you realize that only less than 2% of white Americans own slaves?
And while she didn't name a specific year in her claim on CNN, she did tweet this out later saying, "I'm denigrating all of humanity by pointing out that 98% of American white people in 1860 didn't perpetrate slavery." But let's take a look at this claim. Because yes, as the data shows, in 1860, there were 393,975 slave owners in the United States out of a total population of 31,183,582, or just 1.26% of the population. But let's take a closer look at that, because by taking a look at this map from 1860 of the percent of households that owned slaves at the time, we can see that slavery was no longer practiced in the North and was only practiced down here in the South. And so yeah, if we eliminate those 18 free states and only concentrate on the remaining 15 slave states, you can see we get that same amount of slave owners that now have a population of just 12 million. That's almost 19 million off of the original number, which gets us to 3.22% of the population owning slaves. And so yeah, if we eliminate those 18 free states and only concentrate on the remaining 15 slave states, you can see we get that same amount of slave owners that now have a population of just 12 million. That's almost 19 million off of the original number, which gets us to 3.22% of the population owning slaves. But here's another problem. If we just look at the U.S. slave states in 1860, we can see that in the slave column here, we have almost 4 million slaves. And because they can't own themselves, we gotta minus them out too. And so if we remove them, we get 8.2 million with the same amount of slave owners, and now that number jumps up to 4.75% of the free population of these 15 states.
In some areas, it meant nearly half of white families were directly tied to slavery, whether through ownership or economic dependence on the system. But DL wasn't just dropping numbers, he was connecting the dots. He reminded viewers that slavery in America wasn't some fringe activity, it was the backbone of the nation's economy. Cotton, sugar, tobacco, railroads, even Wall Street banking, none of it existed without the labor of enslaved people. Jillian's statistic wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous because it excused that reality. Then DL pushed the conversation global. He argued that America's obsession with defending slavery was so extreme that it sparked the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history, the Civil War. And that's not where it ends. According to DL, Other nations studied America's playbook of oppression. Nazi Germany looked to Jim Crow laws when drafting their racial policies. Apartheid South Africa borrowed from segregationist strategies that America pioneered. In his words, America didn't just create slavery, it exported racism worldwide. By the time DL was finished, Jillian's arguments looked flimsy, outdated, and embarrassingly shallow.
CNN has done what I think a large percentage of the media has done, is they try to do white supremacy light. Like whether it was Rush Limbaugh on Monday Night Football or Megyn Kelly on NBC, because they know how pervasive that attitude is, and they know it could be a good revenue stream. So they try to, to appeal to white supremacy light. Because I'm not saying that all white people are white supremacists or even identify with them, but I am saying that most white people agree with the goals of white supremacy, which is to keep white people in charge. And I don't care who it is. You watch CNN and you can't tell whether you're watching Newsmax, you can't tell whether you're watching Fox News, and they feel so comfortable, so very comfortable saying the things that they say. Because like the media, like with Rush Limbaugh on Monday Night Football, which nobody understood that, to Megyn Kelly on NBC. I remember when Roseanne's show got the reboot, and she said some racist things, and she said I was taking Ambien. I was taking Ambien. I'm like, no, Ambien make you sleepy, not hate black people. You must have been taking Nigatol. But it's amazing how corporate America is always open to embracing white supremacy light.
This wasn't just a fitness trainer on the wrong side of a debate. It was someone completely unprepared for the weight of the conversation she waded into. Most people in her position would have taken the L, issued a quick apology, and backed away from the spotlight. But Jillian Michaels? She has a long history of doubling down, and instead of retreating, she decided to escalate the fight, turning a public embarrassment into a full-on disaster. Because here's the part that turned an explosive TV segment into something far more shocking. Jillian Michaels isn't just a public figure with strong opinions. She's also the mother of a black daughter she adopted from Haiti. And when people heard her downplaying slavery on CNN, that detail instantly came to the forefront. Social media lit up with outrage. Commenters asked, how could someone who chose to adopt and raise a black child be so quick to minimize America's history of white supremacy? Many people weren't just angry at her words, they were genuinely worried about what that mindset could mean for her daughter growing up. One viral post put it bluntly, if a white parent is this defensive about slavery, should they even be raising a black child? That's a heavy question, but it struck a nerve, especially among viewers who've long criticized transracial adoptions when the adoptive parents aren't prepared to handle racial issues with sensitivity.
They don't even talk about slavery in America, you know why? Because they don't want to give no credit to the people that got black people out of slavery in the first place. They don't want them to get no shine. So they erased it from history. But I'll say it right here in front of the world. Black women got black people out of slavery in America. That's the facts. As a group, black women did that.
Jillian, instead of listening, brushed off the criticism. But her detractors saw something bigger, a pattern of hypocrisy. The same woman who built a brand on being tough love now seemed incapable of accepting accountability for her words. And as the backlash grew, one person in particular stepped into the conversation. Someone Jillian never should have underestimated. According to online reports, Jillian didn't just get mad about the backlash, she got furious. Not just at random internet critics, but specifically at DL Hughley. Word started spreading that she was exploring legal action, even threatening defamation claims against him and Abby Phillip. Now, if that's true, it's a bold move. Because anyone who's familiar with DL Hughley knows he's not the type to get scared off by threats. If anything, trying to silence him would only guarantee that he'd double down even harder. And that's exactly how the internet saw it. Not as Jillian defending her reputation, but as Jillian panicking. Suddenly, what started as a bad TV moment now looked like a full-blown PR disaster. But instead of laying low, Jillian tried to spin her comments, insisting people were twisting her words. She claimed she wasn't defending slavery or trying to erase history. She was just reminding us that not all white people were bad.
What are you saying is incorrect by saying that it was white people oppressing black people?
Every single thing is like, oh, no, this is all because white people bad. And it's totally partisan.
We don't, first of all, we don't have time to litigate all of this.
Of course we don't, because then you're going to lose the argument. And everything is racialized, just like you're trying to do to me now.
Sounds harmless? Not really, because the way she framed it only dug her hole deeper. And then came the phrase that lit up social media like wildfire. After the CNN meltdown, Jillian Michaels didn't take a step back. She doubled down in a way that left viewers both stunned and furious. She claimed she wasn't defending slavery, insisting that her point was about nuance. Not all white people are the enemy, she said, as if that somehow excused erasing centuries of systemic oppression. But it wasn't just the misrepresentation of history that got people talking, it was how she framed the discussion of race. In one particularly shocking moment, she dropped the phrase "black degeneracy," claiming that society focuses too much on white supremacy while ignoring problems within black communities. Think about that for a second. Here's a woman raising a black daughter, live on national TV, accusing the very community she's a part of by adoption of being degenerate. Social media exploded. Hashtags, clips, and memes immediately circulated, calling out the statement as coded racism and evidence of her deep hypocrisy. Critics argued that it wasn't just an opinion, it was a way to shift blame, to distract from white complicity, and to frame systemic issues as moral failings of marginalized communities. The timing of her words made the backlash even more intense. Online commentators reminded the public that Jillian is a mother to a Haitian girl, questioning how she could reconcile these statements with raising a child of color. One viral post bluntly stated, "If you think black degeneracy is a bigger problem than white supremacy, maybe you shouldn't be raising a black child." Others drew comparisons to her past behavior on The Biggest Loser, where contestants, particularly black women, were humiliated and pushed beyond safe limits for entertainment. Social media users weren't just angry, they were dissecting her history, connecting the dots between past actions and present statements.
White friend, don't you want to get slavery behind you? You ain't never had a slave in your mother life. Get this past you. You pay them reparations, racism is dead. Get it past you, white friends.
And then came the framing attempt. Jillian insisted she had stood shoulder to shoulder with George Floyd protesters, suggesting that her actions proved she wasn't racist. But anyone looking at her online presence saw an immediate contradiction. She never publicly mentioned George Floyd or the protests in a meaningful way. The internet didn't let her slide on this. Every attempt at clarification seemed to dig a deeper hole. The combination of her provocative language, her defensive posture, and the fact that she is raising a black child created one of the most explosive moments of the controversy. People weren't just talking about what she said, they were questioning her credibility, her moral compass, and her suitability as a public figure to discuss race at all. This section isn't just a highlight, it's the climax of the story. It's where viewers' jaws drop, curiosity spikes, and they're left wondering, what will happen next? Will she apologize, dig in further, or escalate with legal threats? The drama is palpable, the stakes are personal, and the conflict is unresolved, all key ingredients for high retention. And oh, did they find receipts? Within hours, old clips and articles started resurfacing, painting a picture of Jillian that made this whole situation look even worse. Back in 2016, during Trump's first campaign, Jillian was one of his loudest critics. She gave interviews slamming him as dangerous, anti-gay, and unfit for office. She even called Mike Pence the #1 anti-gay politician in the country. Fast forward to today, and suddenly she's one of Trump's defenders. That alone made people question whether she truly believes what she's saying or if she's just clout chasing for relevance.
His whole persona.
So I'm not allowed to then come back the next day and apologize. That's for the Tracy Morgans of the world. I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. Don't come here talking to sons of slaves about that.
They fought wars, they led revolts, they built America. But in the U.S. Constitution, they were counted as 3/5 of a person. Not a full human, not even close. This wasn't a glitch, it was the law. In 1787, during the writing of the Constitution, the U.S. made a deal. To give southern states more power, every 5 enslaved black people would count as 3/5. That's how slave states got more seats in Congress, while keeping millions in chains.
But it didn't stop there. Critics also pointed to her long history of questionable behavior on The Biggest Loser. From handing out caffeine pills to contestants, to forcing dangerous workout regimens, to humiliating overweight participants on national television, her career has been filled with controversy. The Netflix documentary Fit for TV revealed disturbing behind-the-scenes moments, including scenes where black women contestants were mocked and humiliated for entertainment. While other trainers apologized, Jillian refused, and even threatened to sue Netflix for including her. Suddenly, her CNN comments didn't look like an isolated mistake. They looked like part of a larger pattern, and that led to the final, unavoidable question. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Jillian Michaels. Yes, she said things that were offensive, hypocritical, and harmful. Yes, she doubled down instead of taking accountability. But the deeper issue is why networks like CNN are giving her these platforms in the first place. Jillian isn't a historian, she isn't a political analyst, she's a celebrity trainer. So why was she brought on to talk about slavery and American history? Many critics argue the answer is simple: controversy sells. Networks know that putting polarizing figures on air guarantees viral moments, even if it means spreading misinformation or giving racially insensitive views a megaphone. Some people are calling this strategy white supremacy light, a softer, sanitized way of platforming views that minimize racism, all for ratings. And that's what makes this story so frustrating. Jillian Michaels may or may not face long-term consequences for her comments, but the bigger question is whether media outlets will keep inviting voices like hers. Because the truth is, these stories don't just fade away, they shape public conversations. And Jillian's meltdown on CNN may be remembered less as a debate about museums and more as a reminder of how dangerous it is when platforms chase outrage over truth.